You're listening to the Savage Lovecast, Dan Savage's sex and relationship show for grown-ups. If you're under 18, get out of here, youngin'.
If you're stuck in a relationship quandary, or if you're looking for sexual harmony, well, there's nothing you can't ask on the Savage Lovecast.
So we got two shitty rulings from two shitty courts this week. First, a federal appeals court, the fighting Fifth Circuit, gave Texas the go-ahead to enforce a ban on sexually explicit drag performances, at least on public property, which is a clear violation of the First Amendment, not that anybody cares. And the U.S. Supreme Court, our highest and shittiest court, issued an emergency order to block SNAP payments. Those are food stamps, boomers, food stamps, because making sure Americans go hungry is an emergency that...
Dan, it's Peter. Dan, Peter Rothplatz, what are you doing, brother?
Peter Rothplatz? Contributing writer to The Guardian and author of Ziteo's new morning newsletter? The same Peter Rothplatz whose writing has been featured in The New Republic, The Hill, and on MSNBC? The same Peter Rothplatz who wrote an essay about gay men and Hooters for The New York Times that went crazy viral earlier this year? That Peter Rothplatz wants to know what I'm doing?
Yes, Dan, that Peter Rothplatz wants to know what the hell you're doing.
I am doing the intro to my podcast, Peter. I do it every week. What are you doing?
I am holding an intervention, Dan. We got the best political news we've had all year. The Dems racked up huge wins. And you're doing a doom and gloom intro? What are you thinking?
Peter, the election was a week ago. There's been bad news since. Hell, there's been bad news that came in just today about Dems in the Senate caving on the government.
Dan, you got to take a moment to celebrate the wins. Knowing we can win motivates people to get out there and fight. And we had some massive wins last week. You haven't done a show since the election. I never miss a show, Dan. And I'm not just saying that because you wrote it in the script I'm reading. You haven't done a show since last week, and you should be talking up last week's wins on this week's show.
I can't do it, Peter. I'm too Catholic, and I've been a strategic pessimist ever since 2016 when I let myself believe Hillary Clinton would win. But since you are here, maybe you could do the uplift. You could do the show. You could do the intro about the big wins last week.
I would be delighted.
So I'll set it up. The left, not just the Democrats, but the left had a good day last Tuesday. Peter, how good was it? Walk me through it. Rub my nose in it. Buck me and my listeners the fuck up.
So Dan, this was not a blue wave. This was a fucking blue tsunami. A blue-nami, as the streets are saying. Let me first just go through some of the marquee races that I'm sure your listeners are familiar with. Zoran Mamdani won the New York City mayoral race by 9 points. Mikey Sherrill won by 13 points in New Jersey. Abigail Spanberger won by a whopping 15-point margin in Virginia. You have to go all the way back to when JFK was president to see a margin that big for a Democratic victory in the Commonwealth.
For governor.
Correct. Despite what Magic Mike Johnson says, blue wins were not confined to just blue states. Democrats won everywhere. Yes, even in purple and red states. Dems retained the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They won down in Georgia. They secured 2 seats on the state's utility board by some 20 points.
The state utilities board. Now we rule the world.
We actually broke Republicans' supermajority in the Mississippi State Senate. This was a big deal. And let's get away from the races themselves for a moment. Let's actually talk about the demographics. Let's talk about Hispanics. In New Jersey, the 2 counties with the highest concentration of Latino voters shifted toward Democrats more sharply than any others. In Virginia, the heavily immigrant city of Manassas Park backed the Democratic nominee for governor by a 42-point margin. That's nearly double the average Democrats posted there in last year's presidential race or the governor's race 3 years before that. Trump's ICE raids and his complete inability to do anything about soaring prices have totally alienated a demo that Republicans thought they had in the bag after the last election.
And they kind of did. After the last election, like the talk was all about how we saw movement towards the Republicans and Donald Trump all over the country. Those maps with the little like blue and red spikes all over them. There are a lot more little red spikes showing movement toward Republicans, and it filled us all with despair. And so what you're telling me is that it's just a pendulum swung in the opposite direction? What made this huge difference?
I think the last time I was on with you, Dan, would have been, Lord have mercy, probably almost a year ago. And what I told you back then is that Kamala Harris was faced with a pretty impossible task. She was coming on, serving as pitch hitter for an unbelievably unpopular incumbent president. After he totally fumbled a debate, she was up against global inflationary forces. The administration had not handled inflation super well. And I think that Republicans successfully use those kitchen table issues as a really good cudgel against the Dems. And now the Dems have their time with that same cudgel, and they're using it very effectively.
Okay, this is all really good news for Dems, and we had a really good day last Tuesday. And that says something really good for us about what might happen if we are allowed to have a free and fair election when the midterms roll around next November. That the momentum might carry us through, and we might take the House, retake the Senate, and be able to have a check on this out-of-control authoritarian regime in the White House. Is it too good to be true? Peter, what is it that you want me to tell my listeners to do and feel right now?
I think this is a time for hope. Nothing is set in stone. As you said, it is still a long time until voters head back to the polls. But look, Trump has done nothing about the cost of living. Inflation is still sky high. Unemployment is spiking. AI is only going to continue to destabilize the economy. And Trump seems to have no plan for any of those things.
We've got a plan for a ballroom.
True. Let them eat ballroom, I suppose. But to circle back for 1 second to what I was saying about the movement in Hispanic voters. Also, we saw massive movement in young male voters, another constituency that in the wake of the 2024 election, we thought was gone forever, lost to MAGA. You and I talked about that on the last podcast. According to an NBC exit poll, Mikey Sherrill won young men between the ages of 18 and 29 by 10 points. Spanberger won them by 14 points. Zoran Mamdani won them by a whopping 40 goddamn points. So I raise that, and then I want to talk about redistricting, because Republicans assumed after the last election that their coalition would lock them into power, would install them into power forever. And they aggressively carved up seats in Texas and in Utah, and now they have utterly fucked themselves. And let me explain why. Let's talk about Utah in particular. They saw how demographic groups, specifically Hispanic and Latino voters, were moving out in 2024. And so they repositioned districts that are now just Trump +2 and Trump +6 in 2 cases. Democrats are currently +8 in the generic ballot. And again, Hispanic voters, young voters, they're trending back towards the left. Republicans are realizing they majorly screwed up with this redistricting power grab.
Okay, Hispanic voters, young voters, white female voters, all of these groups that we saw in this off-year election move away from Trump back toward the Democrats. I can't help but feeling when I look at these results like I am locked in a burning building with a bunch of idiots that I can't describe that way. I can't look at them and say, you're an idiot, because I want them to come around. I want them to vote our way. I want them to vote my way. And yet, everything Trump is doing, the ice goons on the street, dragging people away, and the abuse of immigrants, the abuse of people who were doing everything right and showing up at their court hearings and then being deported. That he said he was going to do all this. All these people now who've seen it didn't have the imagination to picture him doing the things that he was telling them that they were going to do before the 2024 election. Now he's doing them. They're like, oh yeah, we don't want that. How come these people didn't not want that enough before the 2024 election, not to vote for this guy in the first place, not to move right in the first place? We've seen this enormous movement left because there was this enormous swing to the right by people who, I don't know, coulda, shoulda, woulda known better after one term of Trump and everything Trump was promising to do, including he did an interview on TV where he said, yeah, you're going to see some little old grandmothers dragged away. And now people are like, oh my God, they're dragging little old grandmothers away. Yeah, just like he told you he was going to. Why didn't you vote against him in 2024?
Dan, I don't know if I'm the first guest in your show to ever quote Ross Douthat, the New York Times Ross Douthat. But Ross has a great point where he talks about how America is an exceptionally decadent society. It has been so good for so many people for so long many folks just lack the imagination to conceive of a version of this country where things get really, really bad and really, really dark. And what we've seen over the last year is folks have touched the stove and they've realized, oh, shit can happen here too.
I said this in the run-up to 2016, that there was a large table flip contingency out there, a large table flip demographic, people who just were bored and wanted to flip the table over to see what might happen. And what's happened is the table landed on a lot of those people. And
100%.
Okay, Peter, this is dark. We're not this is now me being a pessimist, and we're disparaging voters, and the intervention that you staged was so that we would have an uplifting, hopeful, wind in the sails intro this week. So give us a little uplift before I have to go.
Okay, the last item, and this I think is really important, and this should make everyone feel hopeful. It seems like the Democratic Party has finally grown the fuck up. And what I mean by that is they have actually done an autopsy. They've looked in the mirror. They've reflected on some of the excesses that they engaged in over the last decade or longer. And they've realized, okay, if we don't want to lose this country to an authoritarian fascist project, perhaps forever, we need to, again, grow up. We need to run the right Democrat in the right race and just allow voters to elect them. We can run Zoran Mamdani in New York, a Democratic Socialist, and we can run Abigail Spanberger, a former CIA agent in Virginia. And that is okay. And we need to allow it to be okay. And we need to tell voters that it is okay. Because again, we must become a big tent party.
And being a big tent party means it's optional whether your pronouns are in your bio.
Precisely. 100%.
Thank you, Peter. I needed that. We all did, especially after today when Dems in the Senate caved.
No, Dan. Bad Dan. The intro is over. Tell the people what's on the show today. Pimp your new little podcast and then get to the calls.
All right, Peter, I will do that. Coming up on this week's show, a woman who almost hooked up with a man who told her he can't get off unless he's choking his partner calls in and shares her story. And on the Magnum, I spoke with sex researcher Dr. Debby Herbenick about the importance of penile girth for some women, hashtag not all women. And since Dr. Herbenick is an expert on choking, she stuck around to answer another choking question we got this week from a listener who asked me to call in an expert, which is what I did by reaching it back out to Dr. Debby Herbenick. And I got my first ever question at the Savage Lovecast about a horny cat. Dr. Anna Moore, a veterinarian at Seattle's Urban Animal, joins me to help tackle that question. Our 1000th episode of the Savage Lovecast is coming up, and we need your help. We are planning to do an all quickies show, quick and dirty questions, quick and dirty answers, and we need your 1 minute or less question to help make our 1000th episode dreams come true. Your quick and dirty question can be about anything: sex, relationships, feet, fashion, fascism, adult babies. You can record your quick question on your phone and email it to us at q@savage.love, or go to savage.love/askdan to record your quick question directly onto our website. New After Action reports come out every Friday. That's our new mini podcast where I talk to people who tried something new. If you tried something new, if it was a good experience or a bad experience or a mid one or a meh one, we want to hear about it. Send us a quick note at q@savage.love with the subject line After Action Report if you want to come on the show and talk it out with me. And finally, Magnum subs, our next Savage Love Live this Wednesday, November 12th, noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. New York time, 9 p.m. Europe time. If you're not yet a Magnum sub and you want to join us for the next Savage Love Live, head on over to savage.love and get yourself a Magnum subscription now so you can join us. If you're already a Magnum sub, we will be sending you a link via email on the morning of the show. Again, November 12th, noon Pacific. All right, per Peter's orders, let's get to the first call. Pleasure is personal, and so is your porn. Our sponsor, ericalust.com, believes that desire deserves depth. Every film on her platform is made by independent filmmakers who capture authentic chemistry, not fake moans. This is porn that respects you, your time, and your turn-ons. Real people deserve real pleasure. Get 45% off your subscription with code SAVAGE45 at ericalust.com. This episode is brought to you by CareFM, an abortion and reproductive healthcare provider. CareFM offers both in-person care in Atlanta, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and telehealth options for abortion pills by mail in 20 states. CareFM's team of licensed medical professionals provide personalized abortion care options focused on your needs, preferences, and values. Visit carefm.org to learn more. That's carafem.org to learn more. This episode of the Savage Lovecast is brought to you by Foria. Foria crafts 100% all-natural sexual wellness products so you can experience deeper intimacy and transcendent moments of sexual pleasure solo or with your partner or partners. Get 20% off your first order by visiting foriawellness.com/savage. That's FORIA wellness.com/savage.
Dan, I have a pressing question. Is choking still a thing? Because the last 3 hookups that I had, it's all been very heavily involved, and I'm just like not into it. The last guy I hooked up with said that he could not get off unless he was choking someone, which for me instantly gave me the ick, and I was like, okay, get me an Uber. So are we over this now? Is it to do with porn? I'm just not into it.
Yeah, choking is still a thing. You know what else I wish was a thing? Women getting into Ubers and leaving when men try to choke them without their consent, without establishing a shared and mutual interest and discussing together how to mitigate the risks, not eliminate them because they cannot be eliminated because choking is dangerous. I am so glad that you left. And I'm glad that you felt safe leaving. Some women might not have felt safe leaving. And I gotta give props to this guy, as problematic as it is that he can't get off or claims he can't get off unless he's choking someone. Doesn't sound like this came up after he tried to choke you. It sounds like, based on what you shared, you didn't share all the details, but enough details for me to conclude that you guys were having a conversation about shared sexual interests. And he said this, and you left. I'm going to assume that if he had done this during sex and then you talked about it, you would have mentioned that. So he gets tiny little props for not just doing it, which so many men just go ahead and initiate choking. And, has to be said, so many women also initiate choking or invite it. So, yeah, is it a thing? Definitely still a thing. Is it a thing that has something to do with porn? Yeah, absolutely. Porn mainstreamed and normalized choking as practically a vanilla sexual activity, or something like oral, something that comes standard during sexual activity, that you've consented to sex, you've consented to choking, is kind of what porn made it look like it was universally hot and universally desired by all, as opposed to a inherently risky and dangerous niche sexual interest, which we would like it to be once again. Still a thing. And so it's a thing I think you and other women and other men would do well to get out in front of. Since 3 guys in a row have tried to initiate choking or brought choking up or just went for it when you were fucking around, since you know that this is an assumption, a faulty assumption that a lot of men are making based on what they've seen in porn, you might want to say something in advance of sexual activity. You might want to say to somebody, even if you've had a conversation about mutual sexual interests, you might want to declare this thing out of bounds when you're discussing what you might be interested in, when you're making out. You could even get to the point of nearly consent, and you could say to them, just so you know, I'm not into choking at all. Don't do it. Don't try it. And then he'll know. And if he pouts about it or tells you he can't come unless he gets to choke you, well, then you'll know it's time to call a fucking Uber again. Anyway, your call came in. I heard your call right after I read a story in The Guardian about how choking is not going to be a thing in the UK anymore, at least not in porn. The Guardian reports a legal requirement placed on tech platforms to prevent UK users from seeing choking materials is going to come into effect very soon. Also, possessing or publishing porn, an individual possessing or publishing porn featuring choking, will become a criminal offense. I don't know how I feel about this, because on the one hand, yeah, I recognize that porn mainstreamed and normalized this inherently risky and dangerous activity that wasn't particularly sexualized until porn came along and sexualized it. So maybe it's good that they're banning porn featuring choking. On the other hand, I'm old enough to remember Operation Spanner in the late 1980s, early 90s. The police in the UK, hundreds of police officers across half a dozen or more police jurisdictions, I don't know what they're called, police departments, investigated, conducted raids, and arrested and prosecuted gay men for consensual BDSM activities. Men were charged with assault, causing bodily harm, and unlawful wounding. Some men were charged with the crime of aiding and abetting assaults against themselves. All this, despite finding no evidence of non-consensual acts or lasting injuries. Guys were getting spanked and having hot wax dripped on them. And the police kicked down people's doors and seized videotapes and brought evidence to court. Ultimately, 16 men, 20 men were charged and prosecuted and found guilty for consensual BDSM activities that caused, again, no lasting bodily harm. No one was injured. Some people had red butts when it was all over, and then their butts faded back to pasty British white, I'm assuming, since it was the 80s and early 90s. So I worry that as much as I wish choking wasn't as ubiquitous as it is in porn, as beneficial as it might be for large platforms not to profit off of posting, publishing, reposting so much porn featuring choking that's resulting in women mostly being choked during sex by male sex partners without their consent, without any prior discussion. On the other hand, I'm worried about people. Everybody has a little porn production studio in their pocket now called their phone. And I'm worried about people being arrested and prosecuted for consensual, albeit risky, activities with adult partners that they documented on their own phones and kept for private use and enjoyment and didn't post online anywhere. And I don't think that's an unfounded fear, considering the history here in the UK, considering Operation Spanner, which destroyed the lives of dozens of men and sent 16 men to prison. We're going to talk some more about choking on the Magnum version of this week's show with our guest, Dr. Debby Herbenick.
This episode is brought to you by Carafem. It's okay to want an abortion. Did you know 1 in 4 people who can get pregnant will have one, so it's actually more common than most people think. At Carafem, you can choose what type of abortion care works best for you. They have in-office locations with private entrances in Atlanta, Chicago, and the Washington, D.C. areas. And they also offer medically supported abortion pills by mail in 20 states with sliding scale pricing from $0 to $399. It's their mission to make sure abortion is accessible to everyone who needs or wants it. For some people, it's more comforting to come into a private office where they can visit with one of their medical providers and leave no longer pregnant or with abortion pills in hand. For others, they prefer to get abortion pills through the mail so they can decide the best time and place to complete the process. Getting abortion pills by mail from Carafem is simple. Fill out an online form and a licensed provider will review your medical history. And if eligible, your medication will be shipped to you in a couple of days. Cara, their text-based abortion companion, will guide you through the process from start to finish with instructions, reminders, and answers for all of your questions whenever they come up 24/7. With either choice, please know Carafem will support you every step of the way. Learn more at carafem.org. That's CARAFEM.org.
Hey, Dan. 30-something straight dude. So I've been seeing this woman for a couple months. Pretty great, really smart, very pretty, sexy, got a good thing going. But the other day, I was at her place. Now, she's an animal lover. I am also an animal lover. She's got a couple cats. And she revealed to me that she had just cleaned cat cum off of her leg. I was startled. I was like, what? And she said that, yeah, the cat was humping her leg and she allowed it to finish. She's like, I care for my animals and sexuality is a natural part of being a pet owner and all these things. And I was like, no, don't do that. And she was explaining to me, and it made sense. Like, I don't think that she's a super weirdo, but it kind of skeeved me out. And I'm wondering, am I being closed-minded by being turned off by that? Or is it just generally a strange thing to do?
Joining me to help tackle this question, because what the hell do I know about cats, Dr. Anna Moore has been a veterinarian in the Seattle area for the last 15 years, currently serves as Chief Operating Officer of Urban Animal in Seattle, where she has treated countless dogs and cats over the years. Dr. Moore, thank you so much for coming on the Savage Lovecast.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So is sexuality a natural part of being a pet owner, or is this caller dating a super weirdo?
Super weirdo. I would say to say sexuality is a natural part of pet ownership is a bold statement, and not one that I've heard before. I would argue, especially in small animal medicine, most dogs and cats are spayed and neutered, so it's actually really not a part of pet ownership. Even in the veterinary world, most small animal vets, very limited exposure to repro medicine and stuff like that. But even if that were not the case, I don't think that sexuality with your pets is a normal way to interact with them, personally.
I'm going to join you out there on that limb. I don't think it's a normal part of pet ownership, too. I don't know much about how cats fuck, but I thought there was something about feline penises that would have made just a cat humping you. The male cat wouldn't be able to hump you to completion or hump your leg to completion. Am I wrong?
Well, so you're probably thinking of, intact male cats. So a cat that hasn't been neutered, they have barbs on their penis, which sounds great, right? But neutered cats, male cats don't. And female cats are induced ovulators. So cats don't just have sex for fun when they're out in the wild. The females only ovulate when they basically have sex. But neutered male cats and intact male cats can still show masturbation behavior, but it's not super common. So in the veterinary world, we say it's not uncommon, which is the fancy way of saying it doesn't really happen that often, but it's not the rarest thing in the world. But I would say it's rare enough that I've been practicing almost 20 years and I've not had an encounter with a client or a patient or anyone having their cat show masturbation behavior. But it does happen. And when it does, they can be neutered, they can be intact, and it doesn't really matter what's going on with the penis, but they basically have humping behavior until they ejaculate.
Ew. And they shouldn't have that.
Ew, yeah.
I mean, it does make there's some, oh my God, this is going to sound terrible coming out of my mouth, but it's the thought that popped into my head, and I'm not making an equivalency here. We're uncomfortable with the sexuality of animals. Even though we know animals fuck, that's why there's always more of them. There's other kinds of beings, the sexuality of which we're uncomfortable with because of, I think, speciesist or paternalistic or ableist attitudes. Right? And animals are seen as our children. Animals are seen as children being incapable of consent. And we are often put in an uncomfortable position when an animal that we own is clearly demonstrating sexual behaviors. If we own an unspayed female cat and it goes into heat, that's weird and awkward for us because we don't like to think of our pets as having sexualities or having sexual needs.
Right.
But they do. And, dogs engage in humping behavior, even neutered dogs engage in humping behavior. What should a responsible pet owner's reaction be at that moment? This obviously seems to be a pet owner whose reaction at that moment was, I don't want to kink shame my cat. I don't want to sex shame my cat or make them feel uncomfortable about their natural sexuality. And so I'm just going to let him hump my leg until it ejaculates all over my leg. Is that the right response from a sex positive, not want to kink shame, not want to sex shame cat owner? Or should you be shutting your cat down in a way you wouldn't shut a friend down?
It's a good question. I mean, and I don't want to kink shame the caller's girlfriend either, right? You know, you do you.
Just don't do you to the cat.
But just don't do you to the cat. No, I mean, so it's interesting. Like in the veterinary world, the science is sort of divided on why animals, especially cats, do this. Some people think that it's a displacement behavior, so they are stressed or bored in some way. There's something going on with them internally, and this is their way of self-soothing. And so they'll recommend environmental enrichment, you know, find more ways to stimulate their mind with toys and puzzle bowls and cat trees and things like that.
That seems
people
sexphobic
think they
for me,
just,
because that rules out cats just sometimes are horny like people.
well, that's what I was going to say. And then there is also the thought that like, then they just do it because it feels good, right? And so there's not really, we don't know because we can't ask them, right? And so much of animal medicine is we're trying not to anthropomorphize them, but we're sort of putting on them what we think they might be feeling. And so we don't really know. And so there's not like a right or a wrong thing to do as long as the behavior is not disruptive, right? So if the animal's doing it here and there and it is what it is, like whatever, let him do it. However, I would argue that using your leg is disruptive.
Or allowing your leg to be used, not pulling your leg back.
Exactly. So I would probably try to redirect that behavior to a toy or something like that. But I personally would not be comfortable just allowing, if that makes sense.
Nor would I. And I would be slightly discomforted if I was dating someone who allowed for this to happen. It would make me question their judgment. It would make me question how they set boundaries sexually with people, or what respect they have for boundaries. And it would be somebody who I was dating who told me this. I don't want to say I wouldn't be dating them for much longer, but they'd have some ground to make up.
100%. I mean, I think, again, I'm not trying to kink shame anyone, but when I first listened to the call, I thought, well, I think it's time to maybe and move on. You know, I think the human animal bond over the last 10, 20 years has become really unhealthy. We're treating pets more and more like they are children, like you mentioned earlier, and they are not. And that has a lot of negative repercussions for us and for the animals. You know, we're seeing a lot more behavior problems like anxiety and reactivity in animals that we are dealing with more now than we have before. And we're seeing a lot of weird behaviors in people.
Okay, I wanted to bring that up. When you see weird sexualized behaviors in people through animals with their pets, a pediatrician is a mandatory reporter. If a pediatrician thinks that the parent of a patient is sexually abusing that child, they are required to report it, to go to the authorities. If a veterinarian thinks that a patient's parent, because so many people, like you said, have this kind of parent-child notion about their relationship with their pets now, as a veterinarian, are you a mandatory reporter? Have you ever faced that circumstance where you suspected that an animal was being sexually abused and you had to pick up the phone and call the authorities? And what authority would you call?
Good question. No, I have not been in that situation. I mean, most people, like the unhealthy behaviors that I mostly see are more like weird parent-child behavior than sexual behavior, thankfully. I don't know if we're mandatory reporters, honestly, because I haven't encountered it, but I would consider it mandatory reporting. And we would probably call, honestly, just animal control is who we would call in that regard.
Obviously, I think a distinction can be made between a blurry boundary around letting a dog hump your leg, which is letting the dog express himself. Most people would pull their leg away and try not to encourage the dog to view people as humpable things, which allowing your dog to hump your leg encourages your dog to regard other legs as humpable objects too. And you don't want your dog moving through the world making that assumption about human beings.
Yeah.
There's a distinction between what you allow and, I mean, basically, like there's a distinction between a dog that humps your leg and you fucking a dog. There's no way to say that without being disgusting, but
yeah. I mean, I don't like either of them, but one is certainly worse than the other.
I don't like either of them too. And I think if I was a veterinarian projecting myself into your gig, as you give sex advice and project yourself into mine, if somebody was just letting the dog hump their leg, I would say something to them about why that's probably not great for the dog. It's probably not great for your trousers, especially if your cat's coming all over your leg. But if I thought an animal was being sexually penetrated, violated in that way, that would be instant animal control call.
Agreed. I mean, that's horrifying to me to even imagine. The humping is more like funny, bizarre, and all weird, but I'm not going to call the cops. But the other is totally different. But I mean, certainly if a client told me yes, I'm allowing my animal to hump me until it comes, I would definitely say something about that. I mean, I would try to be professional and kind, but I would encourage them to not.
It's really funny. I'm having a kind of memory lane experience here because a very early and famous letter sent to Savage Love was from a young woman whose grandmother was masturbating her parakeet and the grandmother knew exactly what she was doing, and she thought he was being kind to the parakeet. It's a very famous Savage Love letter. I've repeated it a couple of times. You can go look for it. If you Google it, listener, it'll pop right up if you care to read about it. There's one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Dr. Moore, while I had you quickly. Yeah. And this is not a typical Savage Love kind of question. Urban Animal in Seattle is employee-owned. It's a cooperative.
Yeah.
Which is great, especially... The Atlantic had a story a couple of years ago about how venture capital firms are buying up veterinarian practices, independent practices, and making national chains out of them and jacking the prices up, which is why veterinarian care, the expense of getting your animals seen by vets has skyrocketed. And you guys are doing a different model at Urban Animal. Can you tell us about it very quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So we formed what's called a worker cooperative last year, which is our way of trying to combat the corporatization of veterinary medicine. So like you mentioned, many, if not most vet practices are being bought by private equity, VC money, and that's jacking the prices up for consumers. And it's also creating a huge disconnect between who creates and manages the job and who does the job. A worker cooperative, what's really important about a worker cooperative is to understand what type of employee ownership it is, because there's lots of different kinds. They're all amazing. But there's a difference between profit sharing, which is like an ESOP, and a worker cooperative, which allows the people that do the work to determine what their job looks like. They have governance. They get a voice in how we take care of the dogs and cats in our community. And I think that's invaluable.
Well, congratulations on Urban Animal now being, is it a cooperative or employee owned?
It's a type of employee ownership called a worker cooperative.
A worker cooperative. Hopefully more veterinary practices will make the same shift, and we will see a little bit of the decorporatization of veterinarian care, because the prices have been jacked up by private equity to squeeze profits. And that is life under late-stage capitalism. It's not even good for our pets. Dr. Anna Moore, you joined me first thing in the morning. You probably haven't had breakfast yet, and we're having to talk about cat cum and rape.
I haven't. I'm just drinking my coffee.
I'm really sorry, but we really appreciate you coming on the Lovecast and giving us the gut check about this.
No worries.
What if porn could make you feel more connected to yourself or to someone else? That's exactly what Erica Lust does. She's redefining adult cinema with films that blend passion, story, and authenticity. You'll see when you watch films at ericalust.com, chemistry that's real, boundaries that are respected, and scenes that actually turn you on because they're made with care. Every story invites you to explore desire without shame, judgment, or cliches. It's porn that feels good to watch and even better to share. My listeners ask me for recommendations for woman-centered, ethically made porn all the time, and this is it. It has arrived, and I'm very happy to recommend an option to you that fits the bill. Go to ericalust.com and use code SAVAGE45 for 45% off your subscription. That's Erica with a K. Let them know the Lovecast sent you. ericalust.com, code SAVAGE45 for 45% off.
Hi, Dan. New listener here. I heard you on a lesbian podcast, and you were talking about your kids and their sexuality, and I'm a single mom to a 12-year-old son. Then he's a lot of friends, both girls and boys, and a lot of them have all sorts of sexuality or more gender identity preferences, and that's all fine. They even have co-ed sleepovers, which was kind of a precedent that was set before my son kind of joined the friend group. So I was a little hesitant, but I invited one of their friends, a girl who identifies as gay, and when she was over, she kept on talking about masturbation, which was like, they call it gooning, and her parents don't know that she's gay, and I tried to like leave the room, and she wanted me there, and I wanted to be an ally, but I wanted to normalize the fact that they're talking about this, because I think it is, but the fact that I was there and her parents don't know about any of her sexuality made me really uncomfortable. So I'm just looking for some advice on how to navigate things. So far, I'm just kind of like not having any sleepovers at my place anytime soon, but I just wanted guidance from you.
I think with this friend group, you should normalize boundaries. You could say when they want to drag you into or include you in a kind of jokey 12, 13, 14-year-old kid conversation about sex, where they're throwing around terms like gooning or gooner, that, yeah, you're an adult, and if they ever have any serious questions for you about sex or concerns, they can turn to you as a trusted adult, and you will answer their questions in an age-appropriate way, but you are not there as an adult to banter with 12-year-olds about jerking off or about masturbating or about any other sexual topic. So you would appreciate it if they didn't talk about this shit when you were in the room, and you are not obligated to remain in the room at their insistence when they do want to talk about this shit. And of course, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids are going to talk about sex, and they're going to say outrageous things to each other, and they're going to try to gross each other out and show off about what they know. And that's just a normal part of being a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid. I remember when I was a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, my friends and I, we all engaged in these kinds of conversations, and it was weird when an adult was present who then didn't immediately tell us to shut the fuck up or absent themselves. So that's the boundary you should set. Fine to have these kinds of conversations, not while I'm in the room, and don't drag me into them, and you can't prevent me from leaving the room if you're going to have these kinds of conversations. And privately to your son, be sure to emphasize that if there's something happening that makes him uncomfortable, if he has any questions or concerns, he should know always that he can come to you for answers and help and support. The other issue you raise is that this kid, this friend of your son's, who is a girl who identifies as a lesbian, that you know that about her, and that kid isn't out to her parents. Yeah, okay, that does put you in an awkward position, potentially, with this kid's parents. You know something about their daughter, that their daughter is not yet ready or does not feel safe sharing with her parents. That could be a conversation you could have with her, with your son present, just generally, like this, you can be really honest about how you feel. Like, this is a little awkward for me. I just want to make sure, I want to know what's going on. Like, why do I know something that your parents don't know? Her parents could be home